I grew up in a period of time before there was space. You know, I was kind of like interested. I grew up in an area of Northwest Washington, D.C., which had a big park, and I was out in there, you know, looking at rocks, always looking down at the ground, like, oh, look at this rock, look at that. It's just amazing. You know, what a wonderful time. And then, you know, somewhere along the line, Sputnik was launched. And I looked up. I said, oh my God, there are rocks in space. You know what I mean? What a concept. And that completely changed my life. When I was a kid, I had my internet of that era, okay, was the shortwave radio. My parents had bought me $50, huge amount at that time, a Hallicrafter's radio. And I sat down there after I should have gone to bed with a pair of earphones, you know, kind of like tuning this, listening to Radio Moscow. It curled my hair, it came in so strong. And then, you know, all these other different languages I didn't understand but was interested in and so on. And when Sputnik launched, you know, you could turn your radio and get that beep, beep, beep. It was just incredible. It changed my life, completely changed my life.
Nearing graduation in Brown University with a PhD in geology, James Head saw an ad in an employment book. The page included a photo of the moon and 12 words that changed his life. Our job is to think our way to the moon and back. James was quickly hired and began working for NASA's Apollo program, where he helped select Apollo landing sites, trained NASA astronauts in geology, and studied the lunar samples they brought back. In 1972, he returned to Brown University, where he remains a distinguished professor of geology. He's also continuing to assist NASA missions, Russia missions, and is currently working with SpaceX. I know you've had the opportunity to work with the Soviet program. You've also been to China. And even though you can look out at the moon and see and say, oh, over there and over there, there's a far side of the moon that now we're getting a glimpse of. Talk to me about the importance of the Chinese mission there, and how inspiring is that to you?
Yeah, I think Chang'e 4 is really inspiring because, you know, it's opening up Luna Incognita. You know, when 1959, when Luna 3, the first spacecraft to go back and turn its camera back onto the far side of the moon, showed that there's an amazing set of differences. It's not like the near side at all. We've found that, in fact, the thickness of the crust on the far side is far greater than it is on the near side. We've learned that the characteristics, there's a huge impact basin. It's like a projectile hit the moon, created a basin, you know, 2,500 kilometers in diameter, and, you know, penetrated through the crust and excavated material. We don't know what the lunar mantle, the deep part of the moon, looks like. And so when we find, you know, how do we find that out? On Earth, we would drill a hole to see what's in the subsurface, way below 10, you know, kilometers deep. On the moon, we have a ready drill hole. They're the impact craters that form. Projectile comes in, makes a hole in the ground, and brings up the deep material and puts it on the surface. 2,500 kilometer diameter digs really deeply, and that material we know is on the far side. So that it's like a magnet for exploration. How do you explore the moon? Well, it's not easy to do because you can't get to the far side without having a relay satellite. And so the Chang'e 4 mission with its relay satellite, Magpie Bridge, really, you know, and it accomplished that. And it's great. It's opening up the far side of the moon to surface exploration. It's the first. It's a first for humanity, actually.
The mission successfully grew the first plant on the surface of the moon, a cotton sprout flourishing before it died in the bitter cold 14-day-long lunar night. The cotton seeds were selected because of their extraordinary resistance on the Earth. Let me ask you about working with the Chinese, because I imagine they just want to just get as much from you as they can, because you know, you were there. What's it like working with them? And talk to me about their level of enthusiasm, because really the program's really kind of taking off. It's an exciting time in China.
The Chinese Lunar Exploration Program is really a creative and imaginative endeavor. I had the pleasure to meet Wu Yang, the father of the Chinese Lunar Exploration Program, several times in my travels to China. Amazing, amazing guy, very creative, and you know, he is really the brains behind, in my opinion, getting this started. And you know, they're doing all the right things. Basically, they're developing the technology. for orbiting the moon with experiments on the moon. They're developing the technology to, in fact, return samples from the moon, not just get them but in orbit and doing that. And again, with this communications relay satellite, developing the technology to, in fact, land on the far side of the moon and perform operations on the far side of the moon. And it's like the Silk Road to space. You know, they're reaching out, and you know, they're thinking very broadly and long term, and clearly it's going to lead to Chinese astronauts going to the moon. And it's just amazing. I mean, I think it's just amazing.
China currently has landers and rovers on the moon with plans to send humans by the end of the next decade. While strolling through Brown University, I asked Professor Head how going back to the moon prepares us for that trip to Mars.
So I think human exploration of the moon in the near future will literally be not only the scientific exploration, but it'll be the training ground for astronauts to go onto Mars. So in the Apollo era, we took the astronauts to train them across the world: Iceland, Europe, impact craters. Hawaii was a big hit, of course, good R&R there as well. But indeed, that's what trained them to understand how to do geology. And this next group needs to be trained in extraplanetary geology in order to be successful. So all the Apollo astronauts will tell you that when we go to Mars, the moon is going to be the training ground for those astronauts. And so it's great. We kill two birds with one stone. We get a lot of lunar science out of it. It teaches them how to do scientific exploration of another planet, and we also end up absolutely getting information for training for them to take the long trip to Mars and be really good geologists there.
There's an interesting poster on the way to your office that talks about Mars and the possibility were there oceans on Mars. Lots of interesting questions. What's your sense? Water on Mars?
We definitely know there's huge polar caps. The question is, where was that water in the past? And we see some evidence, indeed, that there were oceans in the very earliest history of Mars. And so that's a big question because, of course, we're interested in life and the possibility of life on Mars in the past, maybe even in the present. And so one of the things we're trying to do here is to really try to understand where the water was in the past. Some people think that there's evidence for shorelines along the depression that makes up the northern hemisphere. This would be evidence for a huge ocean. And so that's a possibility. We're testing that out. So we believe also that Mars may have been warm and wet in its early history. A lot of people believe there was rainfall and runoff, and there's evidence for ancient lakes. This is really exciting. We see evidence for these on Mars 2020 mission. We're actually going to land at the edge on the floor of one of those lakes and work our way up to the side. So the water on Mars is a compelling question, not only just about the history, but also clearly about the biology. Could there have been life on Mars? Did it arise? Where is it, and where do we look for it? So it's very exciting.
China wants to be the first country to establish a base on the moon and is planning to build it using 3D printing technology. 3D printers have the potential to make everything from drinking cups to repair parts for the base. The Chang'e 8 will lay the groundwork for the construction of a science and research base on the moon. Talk about collaboration, but there's kind of a wall when it comes to collaboration between China and the United States. As someone who's spent some time there, what do you make of that?
There is a law in the United States. It's called the Wolf Amendment, which prohibits NASA from dealing directly or spending NASA money on collaborating with the Chinese. Anybody in the scientific area, let alone the scientific area of space, is well aware of technology transfer issues. You cannot be naive about the fact that there is a benefit to learning something about advanced technology, for the U.S. to learn about China, for China to learn about the U.S., and so on. Fortunately, in my work, I'm really looking at images and very simple instrumentation that is not at the cutting edge of technology at all, and we do interpretations of the geology. So that doesn't really apply to us. So also we have other opportunities to interact, and it isn't always spending NASA money. So it is not against the law at all to interact with the Chinese. We have the ability to interact on an institution-to-institution basis, Brown University and other institutions. And also multilateral cooperation is also allowed by that law. So we work with Europeans and Americans and Chinese and Russians, and that's fine. I think You know, really critical part of interacting is that planetary science and broad-scale space science is such an international endeavor. You can't just say, well, we're just going to do it here locally. You know, I mean, you look at the history of planetary exploration, the Soviets really started it. Then with Apollo program, we came on really strongly. But at the beginning, we couldn't even launch a rocket into space, for crying out loud. Those days of Vanguard, you know, are still in my memory. And you know, and now the solar system is such a huge place. Why would we just say, oh, we're just going to do this ourselves? You know, every piece of information that comes back from whatever country, from whatever person, is really an important part of the ingredient of building this foundation of understanding of where we came from and where we're going. So, you know, how could we rule out contributions from anybody?
So, Jim, I got to ask you, China and its program, do they benefit going to the moon long after the U.S. made it to the moon? I mean, are there lessons that they've learned along the way, mistakes that they may not make because of what happened here? What are some of the benefits, do you think?
Yeah, I think, yes, absolutely there are benefits from, you know, looking at the programs of other countries and figuring out what went wrong and what went right and so on. And that's sort of like growing up, you know what I mean? You don't grow up in a vacuum. You not only benefit from your own successes and failures, but you see others and read about them and so on. So that's for sure. And, you know, when we first launched, there were 21 robotic missions that were launched by the U.S. before Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. 21. And there were failures all over the place. It's all experience, and it's really, really important to take advantage of that. Because it's tough, you know. I mean, going into space, if you ask the Apollo astronauts their impression of what people think about they're going to the moon, particularly with this idea we're going to Mars right away with humans, they would say, we made it look too easy. We made it look too easy. It was really tough to go to the moon with humans, and it was successful. There was obviously the Apollo 1 fire and Apollo 13, but we made it look too easy. Because it's hard. And so we can go back to the moon, absolutely no question with humans, no question about that. But going on to Mars, people think, oh, it's so easy on the moon, we can go today. It's not that way at all. It's really a long distance away. It's a very unforgiving kind of thing. We're going, absolutely no question about that. We're going maybe soon with Elon Musk and SpaceX. But, you know, it's not trivial.
29 and a half. Yeah, that's 29 and a half minutes from now. But remember, they left this side a little bit late.
Like most people, you tend to need a job after college. But how did James's first job after graduating put him at NASA headquarters, training astronauts to go to the moon?
Well, I was graduating, and I looked at this college placement annual. It's a book of jobs, basically, and turned to the index, geology, page 15 to 25, and then there's this outlier on page 66, and Tim had taught me, what's that outlier? I turned the page, full page picture of the moon, the Earth's moon, telescopic view, and it just said, our job is to think our way to the moon and back. And I went, oh my God, how do you do that? And there's a little phone number in the bottom, and I called the number. It was NASA headquarters. The Bell Labs had set up a basic laboratory to be part of NASA. And I went to interview, and I was so worried they would find out I didn't know anything about the moon, which I didn't, really. And that's when I learned that, it reminds me of that old Indiana Jones kind of, you know, where it's surrounded by Nazis and snakes and everything, and somebody turns to Indy and says, what do we do now? And Indy says, I don't know, I'm making this up as we go along. You know, it was just perfect. And so that's what we were doing. Nobody had any experience. And so I became, at NASA, a systems engineer. I'd never had a course in engineering. I didn't know what a systems engineer was, but I was one. And in fact, that position and that opportunity to work in the Apollo program really shaped my life and my career, because it taught me how to integrate all these things together, and that's served me really well in my future scientific endeavors.
What's it like to be associated with something like that? I mean, it had to be a really heady time, you know, the march up to and then the actual execution.
You know, working in the Apollo program was just fundamentally amazing. You know, of course, it was very exciting, but the most important thing was, in fact, working with people. because you got to work with people way outside your wheelhouse, you know, way outside. I had to learn cosmic ray physics because, in fact, I was dealing with trying to place an experiment on the moon. There was a cosmic ray physics experiment, or a seismometer, or something like that, or just simply teaching the astronauts how to be a geologist. I mean, these are not, you know, things that there isn't a textbook on how to do this at all. And I think the most exciting thing to me was the demonstration that we did every day of what you could do if you had a common goal and you worked together. You know, things like competition between people or personality conflicts were really minimized. It was like if somebody said, oh, that person is such a jerk, you go, we're launching on Tuesday, we don't have time for that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah, but that was sort of known. You didn't do that because you didn't have time for that. And so, you know, you took the best of everybody, you worked it together, everybody was included. When you had a meeting, like a mission review meeting, I mean, is it a go or a no-go? Everybody in the room had the right to stand up, and the mission controller would go around the room and say, well, is there any other input? If you had something, you should speak up. And you, even as a 20-something, I mean, you know, I'm a 20-something for Christ's sake, you know, we were expected to speak up if we had something to say, for sure.
12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Oh, they spoke up, and those 20-something kids did it. On July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 landed the first two people on the moon, Commander Neil Armstrong and pilot Buzz Aldrin. But they weren't there to simply plant a flag and go home. They were on a mission, part of which was to collect rocks and minerals for James Head and his team to analyze back home.
We were looking for deep crustal material, which had these big crystals, which had what's called twinning, which is a kind of a reflection, you see. And so Dave Scott, the commander, you know, he is walking across the surface of the moon, exploring the moon, and he sees from about 10 meters away, he looks and sees this glinting of this mineral and the scale that we wanted, that he was looking for. And he said just simply, Houston, I think we found what we came for. 10 meters away. And it was the so-called Genesis rock. It was that piece of rock. And so, you know, this is an astronaut who was a test pilot to start with, a great test pilot, okay? But his wife, Lurton, told me, pulled me aside one day and said, Jim, it's just horrible. I said, what's the problem? She says, well, I had to go take a course in geology at the local community college just so I could talk to Dave at dinner. You know, I mean, you ruined him. You know, she's kidding, but you know, he was so enthusiastic, as was Jim Irwin on that mission. And you know, I think you know, that's why you need to do this, because the human brain is what you're sending to the moon. It's not just about you know, like, oh yeah, plant the flag, or you know, Houston, we've got a problem, or anything like that. It's really the human brain.
So when they say, Houston, I think we found what we came looking for a guy like you who's back here on Earth, that must be music to your ears.
Oh my God, yeah. Same thing, and same with the orange soil on Apollo 17. You know, you hear the excitement in their voices. It's just incredible.
So when it comes back down and you can actually look at it and see this material that was up there, what's that like for you for the first time?
Well, you know, it's amazing to be able to hold in your hands a rock that's over 4 billion years old. You know, it's just incredible. You know, you go from, oh my God, you know, here it is, to what is it telling us? So there's two rushes, if you will. The initial, like, oh my God, we actually got this rock back. It's what we wanted. And then it's like, okay, then the rush is, what's it telling us? What's it telling us? And that is so exciting. It takes a little longer than an initial rush, but it's just totally exciting.
A few years ago, I interviewed the 8th person to walk on the moon. Astronaut James Irwin was one of Apollo 15's pilots. And I asked him what it was like to be in orbit, circling the moon, looking out into space. And his response was profound. He said the more important question is, what's it like being up there and looking back down on Earth? That changes you more because you think about how insignificant Earth is in terms of space. I asked James Head the same question.
Any astronaut who has been in space will tell you about the overview effect, that, you know, even if they're only in Earth or only in Earth orbit, okay, they look back and they see the tenuous nature of the atmosphere. They see, you know, horizon to horizon that they, you know, it's the whole planet, and it comes up again just really soon. And, you know, the overview effect is really humbling. When we were in the Apollo 15 mission in mission control, we had just put the Apollo 15 crew to bed on the moon, okay, and so we were taking a break and walking out. And I remember walking out with Deke Slayton, who was the director, he was the head of the astronaut corps at that time. And Deke and I said, "Hey, Deke, how's it going?" We walked out the front door of mission control and looked up, and it was, oh my God, they're up there. It was like, Deke is a hard-nosed guy. It was like, oh my God, you know, it's like incredible. It's just incredible, you know, that we just put them to bed on the moon, you know.
Wow. Those are almost tears
Yes,
inspiring
totally.
kind of
No,
moments.
it was, oh my God, you know, yeah, it's incredible.